So, once upon a time, over 2 years ago, I said that I would like to make a video reviewing all of the Lifetime Wrong movies. I've covered a lot of Lifetime movies on this channel. I don't remember exactly how I got into it, but in the past few years, I have watched over 100 Lifetime movies. There's something comforting about the campy and shamelessly formulaic stylings of a straight-to-television thriller, and clearly Lifetime knows it, because in 2016, they began to produce a series of films that were even more campy and shamelessly formulaic than the average Lifetime fare. Meet The Wrong. The Wrong series consists of a whopping 26 films and counting. This is not a series in the traditional sense. There's no continuity between these films. Each one tells a different story, presumably in a different universe. The Wrong is more of a series based on recurring themes, story elements, cast, and crew. The series gets its name from each film being titled The Wrong something. The Wrong Roommate, The Wrong Teacher, The Wrong Real Estate Agent, etc. Each film is directed by homoerotic straight-to-video legend David DeCoteau, known for such hits as the Brotherhood series, the 1313 series, Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, Puppet Master 3, Bigfoot vs. D.B. Cooper, A Talking Cat, and many, many more. David DeCoteau's oeuvre probably contains enough material for several videos, but I've decided that reviewing any more than his 26 Wrong films would just be a little too much for me today, but I am making a companion video for my Patreon where I review some of his other films. So check out my Patreon if you want to hear my takes on titles like Grizzly Rage, Runaway Christmas Bride, Wolves of Wall Street, and more. Anyway, in addition to the director, almost all of the films are written by a few recurring screenwriters. Producers Jeffrey Schenk and Peter Sullivan have story credits on every Wrong film. I'm not sure if that means they come up with the title and general concept of each film, or if they just get a story credit because of their producing role somehow, but they're always credited as writers. And most of the actual screenplays are written by either Matthew Jason Walsh, who's a longtime collaborator of DeCoteau, Robert Dean Kline, who, spoiler alert, is my favorite Wrong writer. I think his movies are often a cut above the others. And finally, Adam Rockoff, who has written a few horror films and a lot of TV films. I actually have one-sided beef with Adam Rockoff because he is the author of a book on the slasher genre that I don't think is very good. But additionally, in my opinion, he also writes pretty boring Lifetime movies. Anyway, there are also many actors who recur in many different Wrong movies, and I'll introduce some of them to you as we go through the movies. Most conspicuously, every single Wrong film features actress Vivica A. Fox, sometimes in the lead role, but often in supporting roles. She's usually playing stern but good-hearted authority figures with great instincts, bosses, detectives, high school principals, and the like. And at the end of almost every Wrong movie, Vivica's character makes sure to give us a hilarious and cathartic title drop.
Looks like you messed with the wrong cheerleader.
Notice I said almost every. As iconic as this convention would become, it actually doesn't appear until the 5th Wrong movie, The Wrong Man.
Told you he was the wrong man.
Then they drop it again for the next 2 movies, The Wrong Cruise and The Wrong Friend, but luckily it's back by The Wrong Teacher, and from there on out, it's present throughout the entire series.
You messed with the wrong teacher.
Earlier in the series, non-Vivica characters will sometimes deliver these title drops, but at a certain point, it becomes Vivica's thing exclusively.
Girl, looks like you picked the wrong Mr. Right.
In terms of plot, the Wrong movies are all thrillers with variations on essentially the same premise. Every movie involves a naive protagonist, usually a woman but not always, meeting or reuniting with someone who seems great at first but gradually reveals themselves to be evil and deranged, stopping at nothing to either steal or insert themselves into the protagonist's life. This is a common type of plot for Lifetime in general. My theory is that this formula stems from the the erotic thriller trend of the late 80s and early 90s, films like Fatal Attraction, Single White Female, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And I've read some writing that argues that those movies were themselves descendants of film noir, especially the femme fatale archetype. As I've discussed in some of my other Lifetime videos, I also think Lifetime preys on a lot of borderline conservative anxieties, specifically those that might resonate with suburban women, whom I imagine to be Lifetime's primary audience based on the characters and settings typical of these films. This sort of fear of the unknown, fear of the other, fear of modernity, technology, promiscuity. There's also an extremely consistent fear of home invasion exploited by these movies that scratches this not in my backyard kind of itch. So that's the underlying messaging of the Wrong series and much of Lifetime's canon, in my opinion. They seem to exist largely to justify reactionary paranoia, but I'll touch on that a little more in some of the individual movie reviews. I have now watched every single Wrong movie, and I intend to review every single one. To be clear, I am only counting films that are officially in the Wrong series, meaning directed by David DeCoteau and starring Vivica A. Fox. There are a couple of other Lifetime movies with similar titles, like The Wrong House, The Wrong Neighbor, The Wrong Daughter, which stars Sydney Sweeney, but these are not technically in the Wrong series. They're unrelated. If it doesn't involve David and Vivica, it doesn't count. There are also a few Wrong movies that I actually already reviewed back in my Lifetime Cheerleader video, so I won't be reviewing those ones in detail. Check out my Lifetime Cheerleader video for my thoughts on The Wrong Cheerleader, The Wrong Cheerleader Coach, and The Wrong Cheer Captain.
Looks like I hired the wrong cheerleader coach.
Additionally, this series technically has a spin-off, a TV miniseries of sorts called Keeping Up with the Joneses. This is a crime drama about the exploits of a wealthy real estate dynasty consisting of 7 feature-length episodes.
The Jones Family. The closest thing Pacific Hills has to royalty.
Despite the name, this is definitely an entry in the Wrong franchise due to the presence of Vivica A. Fox, director David DeCoteau, and frequent Wrong writer Adam Rockoff, as well as each episode having the Wrong title convention. I originally planned to include a review of this series in this video, but honestly, it was so boring. Like, all of these movies are boring, but Keeping Up with the Joneses was really soul-crushingly boring. And after making it through about 4 episodes, I was like, wait a minute, this is my YouTube video. I'm my own boss. If I don't want to review this show, I can just not do that. So I'm sorry if any of you were really looking forward to hearing my thoughts on Lifetime's Keeping Up with the Joneses, but believe me when I tell you, you're not missing much. At least half of the show is just characters sitting around and discussing vague, boring business and real estate drama.
If Webb engineered the kidnapping to get the deed, then why in the world would he have bribed this Leo to pull the commercial zoning permit?
And the other half is just Vivica A. Fox pouring drinks for herself.
Nice.
Needless to say, I decided to scrap that part of the video. Anyway, for my Wrong reviews, I thought about doing a similar structure to the one I did in my Lifetime Cheerleader video, where I created categories of quality, but this proved difficult because the Wrong series is truly so homogenous. I had to watch all of them more than once just to be able to remember them and tell them apart from each other. While there are a few good and bad standouts here and there, the majority of these films are just the exact same level of blah, and I wasn't sure my former categories really applied anymore. So instead, I will be going through the films in chronological order of release and assigning a representative letter grade to each one. These are the 3 options: A for above average, B for bad, and O for okay. I call it ABO. Hopefully that's not already being used for anything. Something to note is that although the average Lifetime movie isn't super high in quality, the Wrong movies are generally even worse in quality than the average Lifetime movie. The filmmaking is worse, and as I've said, the stories are even more predictable and repetitive than usual. So all of these ratings are going to be kind of relative. You have to understand that the baseline quality for these films is already quite low. Most of the Wrong movies fall into into the okay category for me, meaning they don't stand out to me as particularly good or bad for a wrong movie. If a wrong movie is above average, that means I found it particularly entertaining. If it's bad, it means it is lower quality than the average wrong movie, which is saying something. And like my Lifetime Cheerleader video, I'd like to establish a wrong drinking game. There are a lot of recurring conventions in wrong movies, so the series lends itself well to this. So drink every time a character mentions wine. This happens very often, believe it or not.
Thank God for wine. Janice.
A character reveals that one or both of their parents are dead.
She's had a lot of difficulty since her father passed away.
He got foster care when his parents died.
A person in a hoodie lurks creepily around a victim's house. Said villain sets up hidden cameras in the victim's house. Villain is revealed to have a creepy shrine in their house covered in pictures of the victim. There's a stock footage transition to establish a new location. You see this a lot when characters are headed to restaurants or bars. A man takes off his shirt. That's kind of a David DeCoteau staple. A character sneaks up behind another character and hits them over the head with a heavy thing. This happens so often, sometimes multiple times in the same movie. And finally, finish your drink when Vivica or any other character says the title of the movie.
Looks like you picked the wrong blind date.
If you're not a drinker, this list could easily be repurposed into a bingo card or something like that. And one more thing, I have to give a huge thank you to Gang Fight on Twitter, who ages ago helped me find copies of some of the wrong movies I was having trouble tracking down. Sometimes TV movies like this are obscure, sometimes they're not on streaming, so that was super helpful. Couldn't have done it without you, Twitter user Gang Fight. But you've all waited long enough. Without further ado, let's get wrong. The Wrong Roommate was the very first Wrong movie, and it set the tone for a lot of the recurring themes, conventions, and cast members we're going to see throughout the rest of the series. This one follows Lori, a college professor living with her niece, who meets Alan, the hunk next door, who's renting out her aunt's guest house, I think.
I'm renting the guest apartment for the summer.
Not sure that qualifies as a roommate, but whatever. Of course, Alan seems great at first. He's an artist who paints giant pictures of scorpions, but soon things start to unravel. Lori also has this ex-fiance, Mark, who won't leave her alone. He's always showing up trying to get her back, and about halfway through the movie, we learn that Mark has actually hired Alan to help him get Lori back. Somehow.
You're supposed to get her all worked up, you break her heart, then you split. Then I swoop in and save the day.
This is a plot point we'll see a lot throughout the Wrong series. There's often a twist where you learn that the apparent villain is actually in league with another character who's also secretly a villain. But villain number one is getting too attached, which worries villain number two, and this conflict prompts villain number one to double-cross and murder villain number two.
Just do your job.
Often by sneaking up behind them and hitting them over the head with a heavy thing. Vivica's role in this one is a detective, and she's honestly barely in this one at all. Her screen time can vary a lot from movie to movie. Eric Roberts also plays a small role as a coworker of Lori's. Eric Roberts is in a lot of Lifetime movies, including a lot of Wrong movies. He's a funny actor. My first impression was that he seemed drunk in this movie.
Congratulations! You survived your first day as a college professor.
But I don't think he is. I think that's just his style, and the guy gets a lot of work, so good for him. The lead actress in this one is Jessica Morris, and we are going to be seeing a lot of her throughout the series. She is probably the most common recurring Wrong protagonist actress. Another actor in this one that we're going to be seeing a lot of is Jason Shane Scott, who plays Alan. He shows up almost as often as Jessica Morris. They're both former soap opera actors, and he's actually been acting in David DeCoteau movies for many years, so I assume that's how he got involved in The Wrong. We also have Dominique Swain, William McNamara, and Hilary Shepard. They will all pop up again as supporting cast in many of these movies. Overall, I have to give The Wrong Roommate a B for bad. It's not the most egregious or boring movie on the list or anything, but it looks pretty bad. The acting is not great all around. Like I said, the title doesn't even even really make sense. It's kind of lacking that strong concept that some of the other movies have. And, of course, there's no title drop at the end of this one, so you don't even get that out of it. Drink for wine.
Thank God for wine.
And for someone sneaking up behind a guy and hitting him over the head with a heavy thing. It happens twice in a row. In The Wrong Child, Vivica plays the lead, so at least we have a bigger Vivica presence here. This movie sees a mysterious teenager, Andrew, showing up on the doorstep of wealthy married couple Renee and Charles, claiming to be Charles's long-lost illegitimate son. Everyone welcomes Andrew right away, except for Charles, who's suspicious of Andrew's motives. This one opens with a fun flashback scene. It's very slasher-esque. We see the villain as a young boy witnessing his mother murder his abusive father. It's not the kind of scene we usually get in these movies. But sadly, the rest of the movie doesn't really live up to that part. The rest is pretty dull and by the book. The twist in this one is that Charles actually hired Andrew to pretend to be his son to help him out of financial ruin somehow. I don't really understand how or why.
Until you can convince Renee to come up with that college tuition to Berkeley before you mysteriously disappear like we planned.
But it makes the rest of the movie make less sense, because if Charles was in on it the whole time, why did he act so hostile and suspicious towards Andrew? I'm sure he was trying to play the part, like he wasn't expecting this, but his behavior seems over the top for someone who actually wants and expects Andrew to invade their lives. But also, this is basically the same type of twist as The Wrong Roommate. I gave this one a B for bad as well. There are a couple of campy bright spots, like some of the performances.
You are nothing but a punk-ass loser.
Hey, buddy. This feel-good montage when they first met Andrew and Vivica and her daughter spend the day with him, and they do a comical amount of activities. Like, this is all supposed to take place over one day, but they're playing frisbee, they're playing tennis, they're going through family photo albums, they're going to a music store. This montage is set to this song that I swear appears in like half of the Wrong movies. I hear it all the time.
Skits.
There's also this bit at the end where Andrew has gone full evil mode, holding the daughter hostage, and he's wrapped her up like a Christmas present. I thought that was really funny. But ultimately, most of the movie is pretty boring and uncompelling. They also keep referencing 6 Degrees of Separation and The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Also, 6 Degrees of Separation. I'm definitely working more of a talented Mr. Ripley angle here.
And one of my pet peeves is when a bad movie tries to reference better movies or literature to make themselves seem more legitimate. Really, all they're doing is inviting comparison with those better works, and that doesn't really make The Wrong Child look very good. Also, for the record, I think this movie should have been called The Wrong Son instead of The Wrong Child. There is a different Lifetime movie by that name, but it came out after The Wrong Child, so there's no excuse. Drink for the villain creeping around in a black hoodie and planting cameras. In this one, teen Amber joins the school soccer team led by the charismatic coach Dominic, whom Amber's aunt Kelly quickly connects with. However, Amber's teammate Maddie is dangerously obsessed with Dominic and will stop at nothing to make him hers. My main complaint with The Wrong Student, beyond it being really boring, is that Dominic is really bad at setting boundaries.
Could I get your phone number? I just want to make sure that I can contact you if I'm going to be late or something.
Yeah,
Sure.
Maddie keeps obviously coming on to him in really inappropriate ways, like getting naked in the locker room, and instead of ever drawing a line and saying, like, this is not acceptable, you can't be my student anymore, or telling an authority figure and making sure they're separated at school, he just kind of keeps letting it happen. I'm not trying to victim blame, I'm just saying he's the adult here, he's the school faculty member, he should be taking action beyond just being kind of passively uncomfortable with it. There's this part where Maddie gets drunk at a party, calls Coach Dominic, and asks him to drive her home, which he does for some reason, and then tries to make a move on him again. He shouldn't have driven her home at all, he could have figured something else out, and then when she makes a move, he's almost just letting it happen.
I can't be with you.
I don't know, it just seems like he's treating her less like his student and more like a female peer who's into him, and that's the wrong way to deal with the situation, dare I say. Vivica's role in this one is Aunt Kelly's business partner.
Plus, they get a piece of the ad revenue for site traffic. Why am I explaining this to you?
Great screenwriting. Vivica is one of the more entertaining parts of this one.
It wouldn't happen to be run by a handsome-sounding gentleman by the name of Coach Dominic? So you're telling me somebody from high school broke in and wiped out our multi-million-dollar business?
There's also this funny scene where Maddie has poisoned the sandwich of the school gym teacher because she was mean to Dominic, and it's just kind of a silly sequence of this actress eating a sandwich and then pretending to be poisoned by the sandwich. I'm also giving this one a B for bad. It's pretty boring, and like I said, the story is kind of frustrating because you keep wanting the main character to be more active in rebuffing the inappropriate advances from his student. Drink for the villain having a creepy shrine of photos of their victim. The Wrong Crush is exciting mainly for being the first entry in the Wrong franchise to include a Degrassi actor. The Wrong Crush himself is played by Ricardo Hoyos, aka Zig Novak from Degrassi. I think I did mention this one very briefly in my first Bad Movies Starring Degrassi Actors video, but I didn't review it in full because I found it too boring. Little did I know that this would turn out to be one of the less boring Wrong movies. This one follows teen Amelia, who's putting her life back together 2 years after her substance abuse issues resulted in the death of her best friend. When new kid Jake takes a liking to Amelia, his interest soon turns to obsession. You know the drill. One thing I think The Wrong Crush does better than a lot of the other Wrong movies is the characterization of its protagonist. They craft a pretty thoughtful, complex character with Amelia. She's moving past this really significant trauma and addiction and still trying to reckon with her feelings of guilt for her friend's death. That's more than you usually get in a Wrong movie. However, the most frustrating part of this movie for me is the behavior of Amelia's mom. She really has not forgiven Amelia for how she behaved in the throes of her addiction, and while this makes sense and is probably true to life and could be another complex idea, I think they just go a little too far. With what we see of these two characters, it's hard to justify just how cruelly her mother seems to treat her.
Anyway, I figured you might like to know.
No. You're not a child anymore.
Well, I'd be happy to tell you where I'm gonna be, except you're not exactly the easiest person to talk to anymore.
You're fine.
Like, Amelia, as we see her, is thriving. She's really turned her life around, but her mom treats her like dirt on the bottom of her shoe. It's kind of infuriating to watch. Amelia's boyfriend is also not great. At one point, she confesses her tragic past to him, and he's like, wow, that sucks, but you kept this from me, so I hate you now.
I knew you were keeping something from me, but I just thought you were cheating on me or something.
One of my notes for The Wrong Crush was just, so far the most notable thing about this one is how much I hate every character other than the protagonist and Vivica. Vivica plays the mom's coworker at a nursing home, and she mostly just ends up providing contrast to show how terrible Amelia's mom is.
She's 18. She doesn't need me anymore.
What the hell kind of answer is that? But even if she did, I'd probably still forgive her.
Why?
There is an interesting moment where a character references Vivica's Black Magic, which was a reality show hosted by Vivica airing on Lifetime at the time.
How about I let you watch Vivica's Black Magic?
Now's a good time to mention that Vivica also produces all of the Wrong movies, and according to her, has a decent amount of creative control, so I guess she just wanted to plug her show. Good for you, Vivica. This movie also includes the same twist we've seen before, where the villain is revealed to be secretly working for another villain character, this time the dad of Amelia's best friend who died, who wants revenge. I give this one an O for okay, since it has some more interesting things going on, but again, kind of a frustrating watch at times. Drink for sneaking up behind someone and hitting them over the head with a heavy thing. The Wrong Man feels like a bit of a change of pace. This is the first in the series written by Robert Dean Kline, and it follows Kim, played again by Jessica Morris, returning to her hometown for her grandmother's funeral. Here she meets Joey, the charming caretaker of her ailing grandfather, but it soon becomes clear that Joey may not be what he seems, the grandmother's death may not have been accidental. You get the picture, I'm sure. This one at least has a fun location. It mostly takes place in this house, and I don't know, most of these movies take place in a house, but this one actually has some character. It's funky. It's not just a super generic Hollywood mansion. Kim is a reporter, but she's currently just writing silly gossip columns about reality TV stars and stuff, which her boss, Vivica A. Fox, thinks is beneath her.
I'm your editor, Kim, and we also happen to be good friends.
Great screenwriting. Most of her scenes in the movie are just her in this same room having phone conversations with Kim. So I imagine they just had her come in one day, filmed one phone call, then had her change outfits a few times, and that was it. Good for her. This movie features our beloved twist of villain number 1 is revealed to be in league with villain number 2, but villain number 1 is getting too attached, so he kills villain number 2. This is also the first movie in the series to feature this actor who shows up in a lot of Wrong movies. His name is Rib Hillis. He adopted his nickname Rib while in the 3rd grade playing with frogs and enjoyed the sounds that they made. Citation needed. Maybe it's real, but I want to believe that some fan just made that up for the fun of it. Anyway, at some point while watching these movies, I decided to look into some of these actors, and I found out that Rib Hillis and Jessica Morris, these two Wrong veterans, actually got married in 2023. I can only imagine they fell in love on the set of The Wrong Man, and I think that's beautiful. I guess in the end, he turned out to be the right man. Of course, speaking of which, this movie features our very first Wrong title drop.
Told you he was the wrong man.
The Wrong Man gets a solid okay from me. It has some elements you don't see in every Wrong movie. The grandpa being there adds another dimension. There's some funny dialogue.
I just need to go have some soup with my grandpa.
It's a fun one for Wrong movie night. The Wrong Cruise features Vivica in the lead. She plays Claire, who books a cruise to Mexico with her teen daughter Sky. Both mother and daughter meet a love interest on the cruise, but these love interests turn out to have sinister intentions, believe it or not. I have to give this one points just for the novelty of featuring a cruise setting. From the first second of the film, they're very clear on the vibe they're going for. Unfortunately, relatively early in the film, the characters get off the cruise in Mexico, and the rest of the movie takes place on land, so I do kind of wish it had delivered more on the cruise concept, but the formula is still different enough to be engaging. It turns out the love interests are in league with each other, but it's not exactly the same as the twists in the previous movies. They imply more of a complex history between these two, where the older guy took the younger guy in as a kid, so he kind of depends on him and owes him, but he has a good heart and doesn't want to be participating in these crimes. Basically, they scam American women out of their money on cruises. That's their game. And I'm sorry, but does the teen love interest not have Miles from Degrassi energy? That was all I could think of when he was on screen. Eric Osborne was robbed of this role. Wow, look at him go. I liked how the daughter in this movie was kind of a troubled teen. That's actually a pretty consistent theme in the Wrong movies that involve teen characters. They're often struggling academically or socially, often acting out because of trauma, often because one or both parents died.
She's had a lot of difficulty since her father passed away.
And I think that's kind of interesting. This girl straight up punches another girl in her first scene in the movie. And everyone clapped. Overall, I give The Wrong Cruise another okay. It does the job just fine. This movie does include sneaking up behind someone and hitting them over the head with a heavy thing, so drink for that. The Wrong Friend is Adam Rockoff's first entry in the Wrong series. It's another teen story, this time about Riley, who meets this boy Chris at a party. He seems really hot and cool, but he drugs her at this party, and Riley worries that something nefarious may have happened, and throughout the movie, Chris's behavior becomes more and more alarming. So this one is odd for being the only Wrong movie to deal with the theme of sexual assault, and I'm not even sure if deal with is the right way to put it, because the movie really spends the whole time kind of dancing around it. Chris sends Riley some photos and videos of him sitting with her while she's drugged, and they're not explicit, but you know, it's implied. It's very vague and never gets too serious, almost like the movie itself is uncomfortable with the subject matter. And it's not that I would have wanted a Wrong movie to be more explicit in its depiction of sexual violence, but on the contrary, it makes me wonder why they would write it into one of these movies in the first place. Part of the campy enjoyment of this series for me is the obvious disconnect the movies have with reality, this sort of lifetime thriller escapism. And I guess the subject of sexual violence is just a little too real for my taste. And I'm sure it's just a matter of personal taste to an extent, but I feel like many might agree with me that the Wrong series is maybe not the place for stuff like this, especially since, like I said, the movie doesn't seem equipped to handle such material. It seems afraid to even define exactly what it thinks took place. So that's most of why I don't love this one. If it were about literally anything else, I would tolerate it better. All the other elements are on par with the average Wrong movie. I actually would still give this one an okay in terms of quality, but I don't know that I can recommend it as much as the others because of the subject matter. Vivica plays the school principal in this one, just so you know, but she's not in the movie very much. I do like that this one is slightly critical of the justice system, I guess.
The system favors a person who has the ability to draw these things out.
What about right and wrong?
And I also like that it ends with Riley straight up shooting Chris, but that's about it. Drink for wine.
I need a glass of wine.
Speaking of needing a glass of wine, did you know I have a Naked Wines affiliate link? You do now. I actually reached out to them, partly because I've used the service before and liked it, but also because I thought it would be really funny to try and get a wine-related sponsor or affiliate link for this very wine-heavy video. Naked Wines is a wine subscription service. They're all about independent winemakers connecting you directly to the vineyard. I'm still pretty young and green, and when I pick up a bottle of wine at the store, I tend to just look for wines in my price range and then pick out the one with the prettiest packaging, like a child. So I think a subscription box can be helpful if you're still figuring out what your tastes are. They even have you do a little quiz to help inform your recommendations so that you don't end up picking the wrong wine. I tend to like a fruity white to reflect my personality and appearance. So today I'm trying this Pinot Gris they sent me. If you use my link in the description, you can get $100 off your first 6-pack of wine for just $39.99, and I get a commission. So it's kind of like we're the two villains in the Wrong movie revealed to be secretly conspiring together. And once you have your wine, you can change your subscription or cancel it or do whatever you want. It's really none of my business. Unfortunately, the cat biting the cardboard box is not included. If you want that service, you will have to supply your own cat, but other than that, it's a pretty good deal.
Thank God for wine.
The Wrong Teacher, not to be confused with The Wrong Student, follows high school teacher Charlotte, who has a thrilling one-night stand with Chris, a cute younger guy, played by the guy from Cheer Camp Killer. But to her horror, on the first day of school, she realizes that Chris is in fact a new student of hers, and he becomes obsessive, of course.
God damn it!
So this one also has rather touchy subject matter, but Chris really does deceive Charlotte about his age. When they go out together at the beginning, he buys alcohol with an ID, so she believed that he was at least 21. I assume he's supposed to be at least 18. I kept waiting for part of the twist to be that he's actually a little older and has been posing as a high school student, but I don't think that ever happens. There is a pretty fun backstory to Chris, though, where it turns out he once had this teacher that he imprinted on, who was a blonde Southern woman who always wore a ponytail.
Except she wore her hair in a ponytail and had a Southern accent.
So in the climax of the movie, Charlotte puts her hair up into a ponytail and starts speaking in a Southern accent to mess with Chris's head long enough to incapacitate him.
I missed you so much. Did you miss me?
So that was very exciting. It's actually a lot like the climax of Friday the 13th Part 2, where Ginny puts on Mrs. Voorhees' sweater and stalls by pretending to be Jason's mother.
Now come to mommy. Come on.
Dare I say, Robert Dean Kline is showing more familiarity with the slasher canon than Adam Rockoff. Quelle surprise! Vivica plays another principal in this one, and Eric Roberts plays another teacher. And I have to respect that his character is suspicious of Charlotte and Chris's relationship right away, and seems to actually find it inappropriate. Finally, a wrong character acting like a professional. This one gets an O for okay, but it does seem like this one should be called The Wrong Student, not The Wrong Teacher. I guess they were spreading themselves a little thin with these concepts.
You messed with the wrong teacher.
In The Wrong Stepmother, teen Lily dislikes her father's new girlfriend Maddie, but no one seems to understand her suspicion. But obviously her instincts are correct, and Maddie is evil and obsessive. I think this is the first movie in the series that follows the specific formula of a new interloper appears in a family or social group, and even though said interloper is obviously weird and sinister, our protagonist is the only one with any suspicions, and they spend the movie being gaslit by everyone around them. We'll see this plot in several other Wrong movies. And I feel like the reason for this recurring formula is that it's basically part of the fantasy. You know when you watch an episode of Goosebumps and the kids can always see that something supernatural is going on, but the parents and authority figures never believe them? I think that's part of the fantasy of Goosebumps. Stories like that tell you, the child viewer, that all of your childish fears and instincts are correct and justified, and deliver catharsis by validating your feelings and beliefs. I think it's the same for Lifetime. These movies create a narrative where the protagonist, the stand-in for you, the viewer, always has the right instincts. These movies tell you that you, suburban Brenda, are the only sane, rational person in the world. Every instinct of yours, every suspicion, no matter how paranoid, will be vindicated by the end of the movie. No matter how many people doubt you and tell you you're crazy, we, Lifetime, will always be here to validate your fear of the unknown. I think that's ultimately the vicarious purpose the Wrong universe serves. Like I said at the beginning of this video, it fosters a conservative, reactionary mindset. Everyone is a threat. You should fear the other. Your home is your castle, and you should fear invaders. What some people get from true crime podcasts, others get from Wrong movies. I just think it's interesting. Anyway, this one's a very classic Wrong movie. It features some recurring actors. The dad is played by Corin Nemetz of Parker Lewis Can't Lose fame, and he appears in a few other Wrong movies. Tracy Nelson is in this one. We'll also be seeing plenty of her. And the lead actress in this one, for almost the entire movie, I was convinced that this was the actress who played Chrissy in season 4 of Stranger Things, but it's not. It's a totally different actress, but I think they look similar. I give this one another O for okay. It has a really anticlimactic ending. The standoff between the protagonist and the wrong stepmother is happening, and then she just hears the police sirens and just runs away.
You're lost!
So that's not very good.
Well, I've got news for you. You're the wrong stepmother.
The Wrong Boy Next Door stars the same actress as the last one, this time playing Katie, another troubled teen who's been acting out a lot. Her behavior eventually gets so serious.
Give me your phone. Take it.
That she is placed on house arrest, and here she connects with a new boy next door who claims to be the grandson of Katie's dead neighbor, but is actually part of a duo of criminals who steal and flip people's homes. This one's really boring. Like in many of these movies, we know who the villain is from the very beginning, so there's not much mystery or intrigue. The opening does involve sneaking up behind someone and hitting them over the head with a heavy thing. Vivica plays another detective in this one.
Katie, he was the wrong boy next door.
The protagonist has a dead parent that motivates her acting out.
What do you think your father would think if he saw this right now, huh?
A lot of these movies have what would your father think moments. And this one also has an anticlimactic climax. Katie punches the guy and he just walks away like, I'll see you around.
I'll see you around.
Most of these movies have a little ending stinger where we see that the villain got away and is starting their shenanigans over in a new place, but that doesn't even happen in this movie. So what was the point of having him get away? I did find it kind of funny that becoming obsessed with Katie wasn't even part of the villain's con, like it would be in most of these movies. It's apparently just a totally separate thing, and in fact his boss, crime partner guy keeps berating him like, why are you doing this?
What we needed right now was for you to make friends.
Katie.
That girl from across the street?
I give this one a B for bad, and also a B for boring. It's just really boring, tough to get through. The Wrong Mommy is one of my favorite Wrong movies, if not my favorite Wrong movie, period. This one is about Melanie, a woman who's recently been promoted and decides to hire a personal assistant to keep her work-life balance in check. She hires Phoebe, who seems perfect at first, until she starts to cross personal and professional boundaries, ultimately revealing herself to be evil and deranged. Vivica plays Melanie's boss. Melanie is played by Jessica Morris again, and her husband is played by Jason Shane Scott again. It sounds crazy, but at this point in the series, I was actually beginning to find this repeated pairing kind of romantic. Like, they would find each other in every Lifetime movie. This one is above average for me for the concept. I love a good Lifetime mommy movie, and the villain's performance is really fun.
I see one black and white and all bets are off. Bye!
With all of these movies, because they're so samey, often the thing that will elevate one of them is a memorable performance, either from one of the leads or from the villain. And this one also just has a lot of funny, campy moments. There's this scene where Melanie calls Phoebe's reference for the job to make sure she should hire her, and the reference is singing her praises on the phone while in this tight close-up. And my first time watching it, I remember thinking it would be really funny if she's being held at gunpoint or something. And then they cut to the wide shot and Phoebe is literally sitting there pointing a knife at her. At one point, Phoebe babysits Melanie's daughter and they're finishing watching a movie together. And in the credits of the movie, the characters listed include Neela, Twill, Derp, Zinta, and Sweeta. Eric Roberts is in this one, giving one of his hornier performances.
Well, I could put together a package on a tasty little leash for you. Let me know if you are interested.
I love that the very first thing Phoebe does as an assistant is act extremely flirty and weird with Eric Roberts, one of the company's clients, and everyone around her is visibly put off by it.
I don't know if you're in the market for a new vehicle.
Oh, I'm
Always looking for a new ride.
Like, she doesn't even try to act normal at first. There are some topics in this movie that I've never seen explored in a Lifetime movie before, such as the Me Too movement and autoerotic asphyxiation.
You know that whole autoerotic... what's the word?
Asphyxiation.
The dialogue feels a little funnier than usual.
Something tells me you don't want to talk about Barbara from Yowzers.
What gave you that idea, Phoebe?
There are even some lines that feel like they're being tongue-in-cheek about the Wrong series itself.
You may have picked the wrong day to be late.
No, no, no. You must be mistaken. This movie is called The Wrong Mommy.
There is nothing that makes life more miserable than a wrong assistant.
No, the movie is called The Wrong Mommy.
I'm beginning to wonder if I promoted the wrong person.
No, Vivica. And of course, we get this legendary title drop.
The right life, the right job, the right mommy.
More like the wrong mommy!
Dee Wallace has a small part in this as Melanie's mother. I only realized it was her on my rewatch. She's also briefly in The Wrong Teacher. I guess she does a good deal of TV work these days. And finally, the movie ends on this line for some reason.
What would you like for dinner tonight? Anything you want.
Anything?
Anything.
Grilled cheese and pickles?
Just incredible. All around. The whole thing has an energy, some verve that most of these movies just don't have. This is our first A for above average. Of course, we have to drink for defeating the wrong mommy by sneaking up behind her and hitting her over the head with a heavy thing. The Wrong Tutor follows Eric, a teenage star athlete who needs to get his grades up to keep his soccer scholarship. New student Emily offers to be his tutor, but soon proves to be evil and obsessive. This movie has a rare male protagonist, and I actually really like this actor. It's too bad he doesn't show up in any other Wrong movies. He's got charisma. Eric's backstory is that he got a DUI a while back, so part of his motivation to find a tutor is that he's on pretty thin ice with his mom and his teachers.
You know, it used to be a lot more fun before your DUI.
Vivica plays Eric's mom in this one. There's a classic dead dad conflict between Eric and his mom.
If your father was here, what would he have to say?
This one is pretty standard Wrong fare. It's not the worst, not the best. The villain's okay in this one, but I did expect a little more from her motivations. Early on, I actually predicted that maybe she would be targeting Eric because of his DUI. She mentions early on that her dad is dead too, and I thought maybe her dad was killed by a drunk driver or something, and she's decided to get some sort of revenge by killing Eric. But no, it's much weirder than that. It turns out that she's targeting Eric because he's a hot athlete and her mom left her for a hot athlete.
So you can leave me too? Just like my mother did, take off with some young, hot athlete.
It's a little tenuous. A lot of these movies have dumb motivations for the villains. The worst is when there's no motivation and the villain is just evil and crazy, and that's supposed to be a sufficient explanation. But then a lot of them will concoct a really lame, vague motivation, often that they had absent or abusive parents. It's not that I don't buy it, I guess. I just don't think it's very interesting. It doesn't connect at all to the protagonist. I like the Wrong movies that establish an actual personal connection between the villain and the protagonist. I didn't spoil it because I want you to watch The Wrong Mommy, but The Wrong Mommy has a twist like that. So anyway, I found this explanation for Emily's actions pretty boring. Probably the most entertaining thing in the movie is Emily putting wasps in Eric's girlfriend's car because she knows she's allergic. For the record, almost this exact same plot point happens in the Lifetime movie The Twisted Son, starring Eric Osborne. But yeah, it was funny in that movie, and it's funny in this one too.
That poor girl was just stung by a bunch of wasps, and all you can think about is us.
I give this one an O for okay. I already discussed The Wrong Cheerleader in my Lifetime Cheerleader movie video, so I won't go into it in depth, but for the record, I give this one an A for above average. I think it's actually pretty competent and entertaining, and the cheerleading thing always makes these movies more entertaining in my opinion. We get a little cheer tryout montage.
I practiced this with my private coach. great.
That's fun. Plus, this one stars another Degrassi actor, of course. Vivica plays a cheerleading coach in this movie. Here's her big title drop.
Looks like you messed with the wrong cheerleader.
In The Wrong Housesitter, when writer Dan goes on a work trip, he leaves a virtual stranger, Kristen, in charge of house-sitting for him. Trouble arises when Kristen refuses to leave after Dan returns home. She reveals that the house-sitting contract she made him sign in fact contained hidden clauses granting her rights to stay in Dan's house, so of course she is secretly evil and deranged.
I signed a lease, Dan. A legal document stating that I'm subletting a room from you.
This one does have some pretty funny elements. Obviously, this is a wacky premise. This is also our first Wrong movie to include actress Anna Marie Dobbins. Dobbins is a heavy hitter on Lifetime these days. You might remember her from Lifetime cheerleader movie The Pom Pom Murders. And of course, Dan is played by our old friend Jason Shane Scott. The scene where Dan first meets Kristen is so funny. It's almost enough to carry the entire movie. They meet at a bookshop.
Excuse me, can you tell me where the fiction section is?
It's right over there.
Can you tell me where the fiction section is? And then when they start making small talk, they start discussing none other than Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand?
Oh, I just read Atlas Shrugged, so I figured this would be next.
Well, I know Atlas is supposed to be her masterpiece, but I actually prefer Fountainhead.
You guys are reading Ayn Rand for pleasure? I feel like this has to be a joke on the part of the writer. I gotta hand it to Adam Rockoff for this one. This is hilarious. However, after this scene, and especially after the conflict is established where Kristen refuses to leave Dan's house, this one isn't particularly interesting. The whole premise is really concerned with squatters' rights, and I feel like this isn't the first movie, or maybe even Lifetime movie, that I've seen that exaggerates the potential danger of squatters' rights.
You know, I was amazed at how many rights they actually do have. Like, they can claim a building just by being there for an extended period of time.
From what I can tell, actual squatters' rights or adverse possession is invoked extremely rarely in real life. It's kind of an antiquated concept in the first place, and in most states, there are a lot of highly specific requirements for someone to be able to claim squatters' rights. For example, in California, where I assume all of these movies take place, a squatter needs to have been illegally occupying a vacant property continuously for at least 5 years, without hiding occupancy, all while paying property taxes on said property to try to claim adverse possession. You also need exclusive occupancy, meaning you can't just illegally move into someone else's house while they're still actively living there and get adverse possession. So these movies you might see where someone suddenly steals someone else's house and somehow gets away with it by claiming squatters' rights are probably not realistic. And I know it might not be that deep, but I feel like fear-mongering about squatters' rights only continues to demonize homelessness and prop up landlords as these innocent victims who constantly have to deal with crazy, evil tenants. In reality, part of the reason squatters' rights exist is to disincentivize property owners from sitting on vacant properties for extended periods of time. But that's about all I have to say about the plot of The Wrong Housesitter. Vivica plays Dan's boss in this one.
Dan, you picked the wrong house sitter.
Also, at one point, Kristen kills a lawyer that Dan has hired, and the movie just totally forgets about it. We never hear about the dead lawyer ever again. That happens sometimes in these movies. I give it an O for okay. In The Wrong Wedding Planner, Ashley hires Mandy to plan her wedding to her inattentive fiance, Brad. Mandy seems perfect for the job at first, but is eventually revealed to have sinister motives. This is another good one. Like I said earlier, a memorable villain performance can really elevate a Wrong movie, and this is definitely one of those. The villain is just so fun and hateable, the wedding concept adds a lot to it, and the villain actually has a personal motivation to be targeting the protagonists. Mandy turns out to be Brad's ex-girlfriend who wants to win him back by any means necessary. Vivica plays another detective in this one, leading to one of my favorite out-of-context lines in the entire Wrong series.
But she's not gonna admit to anything.
No, probably not, but I have seen Stranger Things.
Me when I'm talking about the TV shows I have and haven't seen.
But I have seen Stranger Things.
Like, she doesn't say the traditional saying, stranger things have happened. She says, I've seen Stranger Things. This was also the first movie where I noticed how breathy of an actor Vivica A. Fox is. Not like she's quiet breathy, but like she takes a big gulp of air before saying every line.
So, wedding plans going smoothly?
She's just so intense in these movies. I love it. You know, eyes wide, so much breath. I can believe that she would be my demanding boss or no-nonsense detective. Greg Sestero shows up in this movie, the guy from The Room. He just turns up for like one scene. That was exciting.
There wouldn't be any reward involved with this information, would there?
There's a scene where Mandy blackmails a baker into letting her do a phony wedding cake tasting with Ashley, and then afterwards she stabs the cake to show you how evil and deranged she is. She's doing this exclusively for the benefit of the audience. There's a surprisingly explicit sex scene in this movie, and by that I mean not very explicit because this is still Lifetime, but it's more than I usually see in Lifetime movies. They usually do a tasteful cutaway at most, so that felt a little bold. Don't say it, Jane. You don't have to say it. You can just not say it. Don't say it. Looks like Adam really got his rocks off to this one. Okay, I got it out of my system, and now we can move on. This one gets an A for above average. Lots of camp in The Wrong Wedding Planner.
Looks like you hired the wrong wedding planner.
Here's a quote from a Vivica A. Fox interview. I was looking at The Wrong Wedding Planner that came out last Friday. I hit the director afterwards and I was like, David, we are really making some good movies here. The Wrong Stepfather is about Sarah, a teenage girl who becomes suspicious when her mother starts a relationship with her college advisor, Craig. The romance seems like it's moving too fast, and also Sarah's enemies start dropping dead around her, so something seems to be amiss. This one features the mean girl from Cheer Camp Killer as Sarah. It also features Corin Nemetz again, giving one of his more memorable performances. This is another one where we have a protagonist who's immediately distrustful of the obviously evil villain, but no one seems to believe her. Her mom gets engaged to this guy after like a few weeks of dating him, but the mom keeps getting mad at the daughter for being suspicious. Like, why can't you just be happy for me?
But you've only been dating him a month.
Just say that you're happy.
There's a really funny moment where the wrong stepfather is saying something and he clearly meant to say formative years, but instead he says formidable years.
You do know that her father abandoned her in her most formidable years.
I imagine that was a gaffe on the part of the actor, but who knows, maybe it was in the script. There's not much else to say about this one. Vivica plays the school principal again.
He was the wrong stepfather.
This movie gets an O for okay. I already covered this one in my Lifetime Cheerleader movie video, but I'd give The Wrong Cheerleader coach a B for bad. The quality of the filmmaking, writing, and acting in this one are all quite poor. But one new thought I had while watching this one is that maybe the reason it's called The Wrong Cheerleader Coach instead of something that makes more sense like The Wrong Cheer Coach or The Wrong Cheerleading Coach is because Vivica flubbed the line at the end.
Looks like I hired the wrong cheerleader coach.
It's probably not the case, but what if it is? Cheerleader coach is such a weird way of putting it. The wrong real estate agent is what it sounds like. In this one, Julia and her daughter Maddie are renting a house at a discount from Julia's friend, real estate agent Charles, but of course Charles is secretly dangerously obsessed with Julia. Fun fact, this is reportedly Vivica A. Fox's personal favorite Wrong movie, and I think she has great taste. This is another one that is very much elevated by the performance of the actor playing the villain. This guy is so amazing. He was also in The Wrong Cruise. At first, he comes off as awkward but unassuming. The movie actually does a decent job of hiding the fact that he's the villain until later in the movie. A lot of Wrong movies don't do that. They just reveal who the villain is right away, and there's no mystery. Here we get a red herring and some intrigue, so I appreciate that. But once Charles is in full crazy villain mode, he is really committed.
I'm warning you, just stay away from her. She's supposed to be with me. You'll be sorry.
The red herring I mentioned is this handyman, Connor, and he's a pretty unique character by Wrong standards, so he was fun to watch.
So Mr. Milton said you heard some sound in the attic?
There's a creepy secret room in the rental house that Charles has forbidden Julia and Maddie from looking in, and it turns out to have bodies in it, which I thought was fun in that it's a little more morbid and creepy than what you usually see in a Wrong movie. Vivica plays the lead in this, which I always think is a plus. One of the weirdest moments for me is this part where Charles meets Julia at a bar and he orders a rum and milk.
I have another one.
Another one? Rum and milk, please. Rum and milk?
If this was an intentional choice to emphasize how much of a freak Charles is, then once again, I have to commend the wit of my nemesis Adam Rockoff. Top tier Lifetime villain characterization. Yeah, I can believe that this guy's drink of choice would be rum and milk. This movie kind of has that anticlimactic climax I mentioned before, but I have to give it an A for above average for everything else. Just a lot of entertaining elements.
I picked the wrong real estate agent.
That you did, Vivica. In The Wrong Fiance, photographer Abby is recovering from a toxic relationship with her ex-fiance, Richard. Feeling unsafe in her own home, her editor sends her to a remote cabin on assignment, where she meets a new love interest, Logan. However, she can't shake the feeling that she's being watched. Is Richard closer than Abby feared? I feel like as I wrote this, my summaries got more elaborate. Now I feel like I'm reading the actual official Lifetime synopsis. I would love a job where I just write movie summaries for the Lifetime Movie Club and stuff. Put me in, coach. This one is pretty forgettable, but I did enjoy that it mostly took place in this woodsy setting. That's a little different. Most of these movies, if you couldn't tell, take place in the most ugly, generic Hollywood mansions. Vivica plays Abby's boss in this. One moment that I thought was really funny was when they go to the bar together and a little stock footage transition plays, but then it cuts to the characters and they're clearly just in a room in someone's house.
Thank you.
This is another very common Wrong thing. Scenes where characters are supposed to be in a restaurant or a bar, but it's obviously just another room in the generic Hollywood mansion. Also very common is the heavy use of stock footage. I mentioned this in my drinking game. Pretty much any time one of these movies wants to transition to a new location, they just play a little montage of the most obvious stock footage ever. You can usually tell it's stock footage because the camera quality and composition are much better than the rest of the movie. Like I said, this isn't a very notable one. It stars our old familiar faces. It has the classic villain number 1 is secretly in league with villain number 2 twist. I give this one an O for okay.
You still have terrible luck with men, because you picked the wrong fiance.
The Wrong Mr. Right follows Jessica, who returns home for the summer before leaving for grad school, only to find her mother in a live-in relationship with Paul. Jessica is immediately suspicious of Paul and starts spending all of her time trying to find dirt on him. This is a weird one. It's very much that formula I mentioned where the protagonist is the only one who thinks something's up with the villain and nobody believes her, except in this one, rather than feeling sympathy for our protagonist who's clearly in the right, you spend most of the movie pretty sure she's in the wrong. No pun intended. The movie does not make Paul suspicious enough early on, and it also makes Jessica way too hostile and suspicious of him early on. So rather than her seeming justified, she kind of seems like she's just being a horrible daughter.
You know what he did.
Maybe if you were a better wife, paid him more attention and
didn't always argue with him, maybe he wouldn't have cheated.
She has so much attitude about him long before she actually knows something's off with him.
Is everything okay in here?
I don't know, Paul. Is everything okay here?
Jessica is played by Anna Marie Dobbins again, and I think part of it is that she's just miscast. From the tone and setup of the story, it feels like the character is supposed to be a high schooler, but they do establish that she's a college graduate on her way to grad school.
And you'll be going back to start grad school at the end of the summer?
But then later in the movie, someone calls her underage, so which is it?
So you're investigating an underage girl's guardian?
That makes me think that it actually was originally written to be a teenage character. Maybe they changed it so that it wouldn't be too similar to the Wrong Stepfather. But the whole time you're watching this protagonist, like Jessica, I don't think you have that much of a say in who your mom dates. You don't even live at home anymore. You're an adult. And also, it's one thing to want to have a say, but she is acting so bratty and childish the whole time that, again, it reads more like lifetime teenager behavior than lifetime adult behavior. They've also cast this actor to play Jessica's boyfriend, and he actually looks like a teenager, so it's a weird disconnect. Anna Marie Dobbins has an interesting affect. I don't always mind it, but in this role, it doesn't make me like her character anymore.
Shacking up with her boyfriend, living in sin, as they say.
Obviously, as the viewer, you know he is going to turn out to be evil because the movie is called The Wrong Mr. Right, but because the movie doesn't do a good job of building the suspicion, it's mostly just a very frustrating watch. You know the inevitable, you know Jessica will be vindicated, but you don't want her to be. This feels like it was just written as validation for kids to be awful to their mom's boyfriends. It's so pointed and weird that it feels like someone's power fantasy. Did Robert Dean Klein have a really annoying stepdad or something? All that being said, this movie is still decently entertaining as Wrong movies go. I'd give it an O for okay. The frustrating story is frustrating, but that almost adds to the entertainment. Like, if I'm frustrated, at least I'm not bored. Vivica plays Jessica's boss at a restaurant in this one, and of course she steps in to save the day at the last minute. As the Wrong series goes on, Vivica starts to often be the savior in these movies. I wonder why.
Girl, looks like you picked the wrong Mr. Right.
The little ending stinger of this one is really weird. It's meant to show that the wrong Mr. Right has moved on to another location to continue his evil deeds, but it's edited like the opening of a sitcom or something. The Wrong Prince Charming is admittedly one of the more intriguing Wrong concepts. In this one, young lawyer Anna is swept off her feet when her firm starts working with Edward, prince of the small fictional principality of Devonshire.
There's a prince?
Hence the word principality.
But Edward and his assistant Liam seem a little too good to be true. Are they really Devonshire royalty, or are they just two hot, fake British swindlers? The answer is the latter, obviously. Like I said, I have to give this one points for concept. Not only is it a change of pace, but it feels like a play on what is a really popular genre of Lifetime and Hallmark romance movie, the regular girl falls in love with the prince of a fictional country genre. We also have the return of Christine Prosperi, one of our beloved Degrassi actors who also starred in The Wrong Cheerleader, so overall this was a fun watch for me. When the prince was first introduced, I thought his British accent sounded really fake.
This is Liam Halligan, our controller, which is basically just a fancy European way of saying he runs the company.
So then when he was revealed to be a phony who's not actually British, I was impressed. Like, wow, there was actually a reason his accent sounded fake. But then I looked up the actor, and apparently he is actually British. So I guess I just thought his real, authentic British accent sounded bad.
In Devonshire, we say you absolutely can't do business after the first bottle of champagne.
Unless he's such a good actor that he intentionally put on a fake-sounding British accent, in which case, what a performer. His little henchman, on the other hand, Liam, I think this actor is American, and his accent is even worse. It doesn't even sound like he's trying to do an English accent.
For
Royally's uncharacteristically modest. I help run Devonshire Holdings.
Another thing in this movie, Vivica plays Anna's boss. They both work at some kind of firm. I think it's maybe real estate or something. And in my opinion, the deal that the Devonshire boys present to them sounds extremely dubious.
And we're prepared to invest $300 million into the restoration and expansion of this hotel. However, we're going to require a $30 million investment into Devonshire Holdings.
They're like, we're gonna buy this hotel from you, but first you need to wire us $30 million. And this doesn't set off any alarm bells with Vivica or Anna. They're like, yes, that all seems to be in order.
I'd say we have a deal.
Excellent.
It's kind of the oldest trick in the book, right? It's like the Nigerian prince scam. None of the royalty stuff in this movie is realistic, but I guess that's to be expected from a Lifetime movie, and they do say it's nothing like the British monarchy.
I know you're probably picturing something like the British monarchy, but it's nothing like that.
Also, the relationship between the prince and his henchmen is kind of homoerotic. They keep cutting to the two of them in their hotel room discussing their evil plans, and they're always in various states of undress. I feel like they should have just gone for it and made them secret lovers, just to add to their whole deal. This was a fun one, but I do think it could have gone a little further with its premise. I give it an O for okay, drink for wine.
White wine is my favorite.
And play us out, Vivica.
Well, one thing's for sure. You picked the wrong Prince Charming.
This is actually kind of annoying of her character to say, because she's the one who pressured Anna to form a personal relationship with Prince Edward.
I don't want you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, but I was dead serious when I said, I want this deal to be your only priority.
So, you know, which one of us picked the wrong Prince Charming, Vivica? The Wrong Valentine follows Emily, a shy teenage history buff who starts being wooed by new kid David. However, David soon turns possessive, motivated by a secret from his past. The first thing we need to talk about in The Wrong Valentine is the main character's house. Look at this thing. What is this? It's like if Marie Antoinette lived in a Hollywood McMansion. David comes to their house for the first time and he's like, this is a lovely home.
Wow, it's a very lovely home.
Yeah, it looks insane. There's this surreal moment early on where Emily's mom approaches her and assures her that despite Emily's anxieties, they're okay financially.
I want you to know we're good. As far as money, I mean.
And it's like, oh, you don't say. I never would have known. Clearly, you guys live in squalor. Other than the house, I really enjoyed the main girl's best friend. She's giving a very hammy nerd girl performance.
He must be new.
He must be. I would not forget a face like that.
I feel like this is the kind of character I would play if I were ever cast in a Wrong movie.
You guys go ahead. I'm too busy talking to myself.
I don't know. I'm just your ugly friend. Vivica plays a teacher in this one. She leads the school history club where Emily and David meet, and honestly, she seems a little too invested in the love lives of her students.
And you both have a love for history. Who knows what else you might have in common?
But I have to give The Wrong Valentine credit for its twist. I've been saying that I prefer the Wrong movies where they give the villain a personal connection to the protagonist, and in this one, it's eventually revealed that David is Emily's dead father's secret son by a different woman. So David is actually Emily's half-brother, and he's been targeting Emily and her mom as revenge because he grew up poor with his abusive mother and never got the love and financial support of Emily's parents.
The scent of brandy wafting off of her breath as she tells me over and over and over again that I will be a disappointment just like my father. Our father.
I thought that was a much more compelling twist than most of these movies. Finally, the ending is funny because Emily and her mom shoot David. It's very horrific and grave, and then Vivica walks in and delivers her silly one-liner.
Emily, it looks like you picked the wrong Valentine.
And it's like, read the room, Vivica. She just shot a man. I'd give this one an O for okay, but it's on the higher end of okay, if that makes any difference. I already covered the Wrong Cheer Captain in my Lifetime Cheerleader video. I give this one an O for okay. It's a very baseline, average Wrong movie. Not much to say. Vivica plays the main character's mom.
Wow. One thing's for certain. She definitely picked The wrong cheer captain.
The Wrong Blind Date follows Laura, a woman dealing with a difficult divorce from her toxic ex who decides to try online dating. She meets the seemingly perfect Kevin, but of course Kevin is not all that he seems. This one is not very memorable. It's one of a few Wrong movies that on my rewatch I realized I barely remembered watching the first time. The plot turns out to be the exact same twist we've seen in 50 other Wrong movies, that villain number 1 was actually hired by villain number 2, in this case Laura's ex-husband, but gets too attached and ends up killing villain number 2. One thing I will give this movie, though, is that it's oddly critical of the police. I say oddly not because I disagree, but because this seems radical for Lifetime.
I've noticed other clients that are romantically involved with police officers that it's all about control. Matter of fact, you could say that their safety depends on it.
In the first couple minutes of the movie, Laura's therapist, played by Vivica, is talking about how a lot of her clients who date cops end up in abusive, controlling relationships. And she's never, refuted by the movie. Like I said, Laura's cop ex-husband turns out to be working with the villain, so Vivica was right, as always. Watching this, I was excited for Lifetime. Yes, question the status quo, Lifetime. But like I said, this one's generally not very interesting. There is this weird moment where the mom is still in the early stages of talking to the wrong blind date, and she invites him over for lunch, and she's like, "Do you like swordfish?"
Do you like swordfish?
And it's just, why would she say that? Why swordfish? There's also a scene that brings up one of my favorite little observations about Wrong movies and Lifetime movies in general, which is that the fake wine they use for props in these movies always looks incredibly fake.
So I took the liberty of ordering a subpoena.
Perfect, it's my favorite.
White wine they can usually get away with. Maybe it looks a little too yellow, but it's okay. Where they really can't seem to get it right is red wine. It's always bright red and completely translucent, like cranberry juice.
I took the liberty of ordering a subpoena.
That is not a Pinot. That's a glass of water with a Jolly Rancher melted into it. Why not just say it's a rosé, or get a better fake red wine? Surely even just grape juice would look more realistic. Or don't they make non-alcoholic red wine? Could they use that? It's silly, but I notice it every time. Speaking of which, drink for wine.
I think you should be more focused on the fact that it's wine o'clock and you're sitting by your computer alone.
So true. It is wine o'clock, and I am sitting by my computer alone. And also, drink for Vivica sneaking up behind the bad guy and hitting him over the head with a hammer. I give this one an O for okay. In The Wrong High School Sweetheart, young real estate agent Danny is fed up with her workaholic fiancé Todd. When Danny's high school boyfriend, also named Danny, returns to town, she gets carried away in the reminiscing and almost rekindles their affair. But when she rebuffs his advances, Danny becomes obsessive and dangerous. This one is pretty great. I love the concept. Danny, as a villain, is basically an extreme version of someone who peaked in high school. That's really what the movie is about, and I thought that was interesting territory for a Lifetime movie to explore.
When all that comes to an end, when you're barely 20 years old and you realize all the great things that are going to happen to you have already happened, the rest of your life can seem like a really long time.
But more than that, the character of Danny is just really funny. He's very over the top. He's always repeating this little mantra that he and girl Danny used to say to each other in high school.
We'd say, Danny and Danny together forever.
Danny and Danny together forever. And of course, that gets funnier the more he does it and the more deranged his character is supposed to appear.
Danny and Danny.
Please.
Together for...
Danny was also an athlete in high school, and other Danny was a cheerleader. So Danny, at the height of his derangement, will recite this cheer to himself.
Stronger than steel, hotter than the sun, Danny Brooks won't stop until he gets the job done.
Beyond that, I couldn't stop noticing all of the scenes that are supposed to take place in the high school. It looks like they were filmed in a church. I could be wrong. It could be a very weird looking school or maybe a community center or something, but I've been in many a Methodist church basement. I know that wood paneling, those ugly chairs stacked in the corner. I think they used this set in the Wrong Valentine, too. Whatever it is, it does not look like a school. Vivica plays another school principal in this one.
You just had the wrong high school sweetheart.
I thought The Wrong High School Sweetheart was very entertaining. Great concept, great villain performance, great climax. Danny forces Danny to relive their high school prom in this ugly church basement. It's great. I have to give it an A for above average. The Wrong Life Coach follows Jordan, a woman overwhelmed by her heavy workload and unsure of where to go next in life. She runs into Liz, a life coach, and decides to take her up on her services. However, Liz is a little too quick to dictate Jordan's life, and her advice seems to steer Jordan in the wrong direction more often than the right one. Is Liz all she says she is? Obviously not. She's the Wrong Life Coach. The Wrong Life Coach is the latest Wrong movie. It came out this year, and luckily for all of us, we are ending with a bang. I thought this one was really fun. The villain is really fun. She was kind of giving the Wrong Wedding Planner. Similar type of villain, similar fun performance. I know this actress. She was in the Lifetime movie Cheer for Your Life, and she also plays the villain in Deadly Mile High Club, which is one of the funnier Lifetime movies I've seen. I would highly recommend that one. Jordan meets Liz at a coffee shop. Liz helps Jordan decide what to order, and after ordering, the barista says this:
a cafe mocha, and I'll have a shortbread cookie. Wow, that's a lot of sugar for 10 a.m.
Can you imagine? This would ruin my day if someone said this to me. Liz approaches her about it afterwards.
Why don't you make the damn coffee and leave the advice to me?
And I know this is supposed to make her look crazy or whatever, but honestly, I'm kind of on her side here. The twist in this one is great. We learn early on that Liz and Jordan actually went to high school together, though Jordan doesn't remember Liz. And later, another former classmate of theirs reveals to Jordan that Liz actually hated Jordan and resented her for taking her spot on the cheerleading team. That's right, this movie has a cheerleading twist. Liz's tragic backstory motivating her villainy is cheerleader based.
Because you took her spot, Jordan. Right when Coach Lee told you were in, she told Liz she was out.
There's a really funny moment late in the movie where Jordan is like wondering how crazy Liz could be, and they smash cut to Liz in a cheerleading outfit reciting cheers to herself. It's perfect.
So just how crazy do you think this girl is?
Let's find out.
Don't wait, don't hesitate.
Vivica plays Liz's demanding boss in this one.
Less talking, more implementing.
I also have to say, Jordan has this friend in the movie, Natalie, and call me crazy, but I kind of wanted Jordan and her friend Natalie to fall in love.
Why don't we go have drinks tonight? I can listen to you cry into your wine.
At one point, you think Natalie gets murdered, and that made me sad, but then at the end, it turns out Natalie's alive. I guess Liz just had her chained up in the basement or something. This actress who plays Natalie is also in a lot of these movies, and I like her. I don't know what it is, but I find her compelling, I guess. It's funny to watch her and Jordan's mom kind of cringe at Jordan when she starts praising her life coach on social media.
I finally feel like I'm getting on top of my obstacles, Mom. And I owe it all to Liz.
It's like when someone you know joins an MLM. Vivica isn't in this one as much as I would have liked, but of course she does get her line in.
Sounds like to me you hired the wrong life coach.
I have to give this one another A for above average. It was very entertaining, delivered on the premise. It makes me excited for the future of the Wrong franchise. Well, having now watched 26 Lifetime Wrong movies twice over, you might be wondering what I'm taking away from this experience, other than 78 hours of my life I'll never get back. In addition to the troubling political subtext of the series, I definitely gained a very thorough understanding of the Wrong movie formula. I could probably write my own at this point. Naive, lonely woman or troubled teenage girl meets a new person. If it's a man, it's probably a love interest or father figure. If it's a woman, it's a hired assistant or mother figure. All seems well at first, but soon the cracks start to show. The villain might start acting off in front of the protagonist, or they might do it behind closed doors, but either way, by the midpoint, they've crossed a couple major boundaries. The villain may also reveal around the midpoint that they're secretly in league with another character, usually someone who's been set up as a peripheral red herring. Late in the second act, the protagonist is finally catching on and follows a lead to go meet with a previous victim or acquaintance of the villain. Said victim or acquaintance confirms the protagonist's fears, and the protagonist races back home to confront the villain before it's too late. Often, at this point, the villain will have already taken one of the protagonist's loved ones hostage. In the final showdown, the villain delivers their manifesto until someone, either the protagonist, a loved one, or a supporting character played by Vivica A. Fox, incapacitates them, usually by sneaking up behind them and hitting them over the head with a heavy thing. Alternatively, much more boringly, the villain might just hear the police sirens approaching and take off into the night, robbing our protagonist of any agency in the climax. Cut to an all-is-well coda showing our protagonists healed and thriving, and/or a final stinger where we see our villain starting the cycle over again with a new victim. That being said, I'd like to officially pitch some potential Wrong movie concepts. David, Vivica, if you're watching, please consider my suggestions. And also, if I see you use any of these in the future, I'll know you stole them from me. The Wrong Influencer. This one seems like a no-brainer. It's a hot topic, and I always enjoy Lifetime trying to take a crack at portraying modern internet culture, so I think this would be fun. I'm not sure if the Wrong Influencer would be the protagonist or the antagonist. Maybe the protagonist is an aspiring influencer, and they meet a successful influencer who volunteers to show them the ropes, and it's kind of like the Wrong Life Coach, where they're actually trying to ruin their life for some reason. The Wrong Groundskeeper, alternatively titled The Wrong Gardener. I feel like this one could make sense. Protagonist hires a gardener who seems great, but they're secretly like killing people and burying them in the garden. I guess that's a little more horror-centric than the average Wrong movie, but that's okay. That could be a new direction for the Wrong movies. The Wrong Actress, or director, or movie star, whatever you want. This could be like a meta Wrong movie about the production of a Lifetime-style TV thriller, where either one of the actors or a director or producer turns out to be evil and obsessive. This could be a special one, like the 50th Wrong movie is a meta Wrong movie. The Wrong Nanny. I can't believe they haven't done this one yet, honestly. As I've said before, Lifetime loves movies with the premise, someone stole my baby, and I think the Wrong series is ripe for something like this. They kind of touched on it in The Wrong Mommy, but this time I think it should be all out. A nanny who's trying to steal a couple's newborn baby for her own. Ooh, alternatively, The Wrong Babysitter, and it's a similar premise but with a teenage villain. The Wrong Baby. Hear me out. We already have a Wrong movie called The Wrong Child, but I think it's kind of disappointing that it's about an adult child. He's not a little kid. I think we should make a Wrong movie where the villain is actually a little kid.
A child. No.
People love sensational movies about evil kids. The Bad Seed, Children of the Corn. What's that Macaulay Culkin movie with Elijah Wood? That one. You have the Wrong movie climax where Vivica A. Fox sneaks up behind the villain and hits them over the head, but it's a child. You'd have to tread kind of carefully, but I think there's something there. Vivica? Call me. Anyway, this has been fun, but I imagine we've already been here for far longer than is reasonable. If you liked this video, you should subscribe to my YouTube channel, check out my Patreon, especially if you want to see me review more David DeCoteau trash. And if you didn't like this video, well, one thing's for sure, you clicked on the wrong YouTube video.